how was going on Joe Rogan? What was it like afterwards? What's the JRE afterglow like for all of us mere mortals who have never been invited down to Austin?
Yeah, we were really jealous of that, by the way. We had voodoo dolls.
I can
in
talk to him, guys. You know, he's a buddy of mine.
No.
This guy, Adam 22.
He's gonna find us.
Hey, Ryan is like, he got me on Adam Carolla. We're
got
going
this
on
great
Adam
video
Carolla
about
You want
tomorrow.
to know
article
what type
from
of guy I am?
Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
So he's a big Adam Carolla fan, right?
Right.
Like, if you know, that's his favorite guy. So I'm doing Carolla tomorrow. So I just hit him up and I was like, hey, my buddy's like a huge fan. Can he come with me? So Danny's coming with me
We're
tomorrow.
going on,
Oh,
dude.
that's sick. Yeah.
So he
I'm surprised he
shares
hasn't
the
done
wealth.
it.
He
Yeah.
shares the fucking wealth. We got to give Ryan his props. He got me on Carolla, dude.
And then he can do it
single-handedly.
probably whenever. I'm sure he'll fucking love Danny. And it's just down the street.
Well, get us on Rogan, bitch.
That one's tougher.
How did it come about? Because I'm always hearing that
Yeah.
he's like booked out 3 months in advance, and it's like, you know, like you know a lot of people that Joe Rogan knows that he
Yeah.
hasn't invited on. So like, even though I knew that
Okay, so
you would be a logical person for him to have on, when I saw it, I was still like, holy shit, it actually happened.
Yeah.
well, one interesting thing for me was that I kept getting messages from everyone being like, yo, he really likes your videos. Like Dave Smith, Giannis Pappas,
Really?
Luis Gomez. There's like one or two more. Ari would message me and be like, yo, Rogan just sent me your video. I think Schultz too.
Damn, dude.
But
That's
so
sick.
I think he was like over the years, like seeing my videos. But I think, and people would be like, oh, that's my boy Ryan. But I'm sure he's so inundated with stuff. I literally, my thoughts are that he kept seeing those videos, but just thinking it's a different guy every time. Like not really putting it together that like, I like this guy's videos. I think he just kept thinking like, oh, here's a funny video.
Yeah.
And then someone being like, oh, that's our boy Ryan. Like we know, but like, because he never met me, I think
Yeah.
none of it clicked.
And it seems like his social media consumption is
That's what I
kind
think.
of limited, you know, like because he says that he doesn't go on Twitter and stuff like that. So like when you do see Joe Rogan reposting something, it's like it somehow got through to him, even though it feels like he's making a concerted effort to not be all up on social media, right?
It's super smart what they have going on right now, because like to be really good at comedy, like in a way you do have to be like insulated, but in a way you do have to know what's going on too, because it's like you can't. It's it's just a constant problem with like your information diet or whatever, right?
Yeah.
How do you not, especially when you're that big, how do you not have everything always, and then how do you not stay complete? How do you not? The other version is like a lot of people will just, I'll tap out, and then they just start to feel out of touch, right?
Yeah.
So he has his little crew there in Austin. But then, so I went to Austin and I was doing stuff, and then eventually I met him, I think, at the Vulcan. And then,
Is that a club out there?
Club down
and then
there?
I think Tony Hinchcliffe was like, "Oh, you know, Ryan, you said you liked his this video," and he was like, "Oh,
There you
okay,
go.
yeah." And then after that, I think he kind of like knew who I was, and then added me, and then so whatever, he was like kind of would see videos
Dick
and
pic?
like them, and and dick pics back and forth.
Vanish mode.
Yeah, it's pretty normal. I guess being like a comedian in the in that space, I'm a little more like that is my world, right?
That's
guess
what
the
I
same
thought.
as if you were like a UFC guy. I mean, literally, it's like all my friends.
Yeah.
that's
If
his
you were going
squad,
to
right?
engineer someone to get on Rogan, you would definitely want them to be stellar at stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
You would definitely want them to maybe not be an all-out conservative, but like, to make content that,
Not like making pussy comedy.
yeah, because
Yeah.
you don't see Joe like running to have all of the Daily Wire hosts on there necessarily, although I guess he has
Matt
had a
Well, you
Walsh,
know what
Ben
those guys are
Shapiro.
gonna say.
Yeah, I think he does.
I think a lot of comedians are like this, and he's like this, and you can just tell he has like such an affinity towards like comedians.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
there's like some person I watch, a YouTuber.
I'm like that too, though. You see it.
I watched this YouTuber who I saw a video the other day of him sort of like ridiculing Joe Rogan and Andrew Schultz for their latest episode, because I guess they spend the whole time talking about how great comedy is and how hard it is to be a comedian and what a special skill it is or whatever. And I hadn't really heard that criticism before, but there's this guy I've watched like a bunch of videos for, and I heard him make this argument, and I'm like, oh, okay, so is this how they're gonna try to convince us that Andrew Schultz is no good? They're gonna tell us that
It's too much inside baseball, is that what they're saying?
that he just likes comedy too much, and he has too much to say about what a special
I think that a lot. In the comedy podcasting space, I would say that conversation happens a lot. Where a
Really?
lot
Okay.
of I'm saying a lot of us have like no talking about comedy policy, or like when I'm doing an interview and I have a comedian on. Or like not an interview, like more like this, you know what I mean? Like, and it goes 10, 20 minutes about comedy. I'm always like, we got it.
Yeah.
Because I do think it's a little bit over talked about. However, he has that with like 5 things, you know? It's like, then he does a UFC guy and they talk about all UFC stuff. So it's like, if it was just comedians coming on and doing that, I could see you being like, I get it. But in his case, it's kind of like 10 different things coming on and doing that. And then he also just opened a comedy club. And also, if you were into comedy, figuring, you know, I'm having, I think that maybe there is a moment where people are just like full on that for a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's hard to say where it goes. Are you guys? Do you still think that's cool, or would you be like, ugh?
There's been many times in my life where I listened to a random Mark Maron episode with somebody just because I like the guest, or you know, same thing with Joe. And then they do kind of do too much of the thing of just talking about stand-up comedy and just, or even just like naming random fucking people from back in the day. And this guy was so funny in
It's a little too like,
and
if you're into a nerd.
Yeah, and I'm kind of listening to like, you guys could be having a way better conversation. And that's something I feel like I'm frequently accounting for in my brain is like, yeah, we're having a conversation, but what would be the better conversation? Like, how what's the more interesting thing that we could maybe get to? And as soon as I start to feel like I'm kind of having like a reiteration of a conversation I already have, my brain does start
or a conversation you might just have in real life. Like, and I guess that's why it's cool that it's kind of like, this is how those two people probably actually would talk. You would talk about comedy and shit like that.
Yeah.
However, maybe there is a point where it's like it was pulling back the curtain, and there is also a point where it's like, okay, I saw the whole curtain thing. Let's get back to business.
Sure, sure. That's why Lex Friedman's podcast can be tiring for me sometimes because
the power of love.
Like, that's the one thing I like. I like how much love there is emanating throughout the podcast room. But like, I listened to the new ChatGPT episode with like one of the head engineers, and it's got 2.7 million views. And they are taking for granted that the audience knows so fucking much about artificial intelligence and NVIDIA chips. And I need the fucking basics here. Like, you need to take.
You want for dummies?
If you're gonna, I want ChatGPT for dummies. If you a ChatGPT could probably decode that fucking podcast for me, actually.
How could they make this podcast better? How could that?
Okay, but are we doing the podcasting version of that? We're podcasting about podcasting.
Oh, it's getting real meta here.
Yeah, we are. But we're also podcasting in criticism of other people's podcasting, which might be better,
But
right?
it is like, yeah, I guess I think the most is like, just don't only do that. Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like, you're right. If you did that for 2 hours, it might be too much. But if it's like, that's the 10 things you talk about that me and you might talk about in real life.
Because I love Rogan, and I've spent so much of my fucking life listening to him and stuff. But I will say that I've heard him have the conversation on his podcast about how great podcasting is too many times, of like, you know, look at what we're doing. This is so much better than CNN or NBC because we're actually having a real conversation, and we could take 2 hours to make a point and yada, yada, you know, like, and I've probably done the same thing, but that is something that, like, if I noticed myself starting to have that conversation through having watched a lot of Joe Rogan, I've kind of figured out that that's something that maybe I don't want to spend a lot of time digging into.
You know what the interesting thing about like him specifically, and probably a lot of other big like LA comedians, and I'll see about myself too, it's like with podcasters, there's so many things that they go, oh, this guy does this and it's bad, and this guy does this and it's bad, and this guy does this and it's bad, and it's like they go, this guy interrupts too much, this guy does this, and they go, and then lo and behold, every year they're the biggest ones. So it's like, is this just like the same as hipster advice where they look at musicians and they go, oh, this guy does this, that's why it sucks. What's really cool is this band no one's heard of.
Yeah.
So it's kind of this interesting thing where everyone says, gives you a list of things that are bad, that is a quality that all of the best ones, the biggest ones have. And I see that with me a little bit, where I get like criticisms, but it's like when I don't do that, those episodes do worse. So it's like, do they know what they're talking about?
But don't you feel like at the end of the day that podcasting is kind of a popularity contest, and it's about that more than like who's having the best conversation? No offense to Logan Paul, but he has like one of the biggest podcasts in the world, right? He's one of the biggest stars in the world.
Well, you know better than me, obviously, but I think that my take on even what I was going to say with the Rogan thing is, I think that there's something like, yes, he maybe says that same thing, but then he's saying that to like, because he knows it's a great thing to cue you up to whatever, however you feel, your like speech on whatever you think about this
Rogan's
stuff. So maybe
also,
there's that part of it.
He's super talented at keeping the conversation going, and I think that sometimes he'll just be kind of like repeating little like things
That's what I'm
in
saying.
between
That's kind of what I'm
as
saying.
he's like setting up for like where this might go
Some
from
version
here.
of
It's
that,
just like, which is a really important skill to have, because dead air is very bad.
Right. So it's some version of that. So I don't know. There's this weird thing of like, And then there's also like 6 different people watching your thing at the same time. There's people that are just finding out about you. There's people, and so if you have someone on that like is a big you fan and they like hearing your opinions, I know it's more of an interview show, but like maybe you have a version where it's just and then you have some other guy on. The people that are his fans are going to be like, let him speak.
Yeah.
And the people that are your gonna fans might be like, this guy won't shut up. Like, so it's this weird. You're always going to get some version of that too.
Yeah.
And then. So yeah, it's always kind of like, are you? I think this might have been a Schultz thing, but he was like, "Are you spending time on customer satisfaction or customer acquisition?" And those two things have very different, moves.
This has been a clip from my new podcast, Sledge Lords with Danny Mullen. We're dropping a new episode every week, so either hit the link in the description or search up the Adam 22 channel on YouTube. Appreciate you guys.